Garrison's massive hand closed around Bruce's wrist at the squat rack, 300 pounds of provocation, smelling like gunpowder and bad intentions, and Bruce didn't pull away, just looked up with those dark, lethal eyes and whispered, "You have 5 seconds to let go or fall in love." The gym went silent, but Garrison's grip only tightened, his pulse hammering against Bruce's skin like a confession he'd never meant to make. She saw the biggest man she had ever seen walk into Ironside Gym at exactly 6:47 on a Tuesday evening, and every single person on the weight floor stopped moving. Not because he was tall, though he was, not because the veins on his forearms looked like rope pulled tight under sun-darkened skin, because when Commander Elias Cross moved through a room, the room understood, on some cellular ancient level, that it had just become his. 300 pounds of him, shaved head, a scar that started behind his left ear and disappeared beneath the collar of a shirt 2 sizes too small for his neck. He walked straight toward the heavy bag where a compact, silent martial artist had been working alone for 20 minutes, and he shoved the bag sideways with one hand, hard enough to rattle the chain. What happened in the next 5 seconds would be replayed on 6 security cameras, uploaded to 4 platforms, and viewed 11 million times before sunrise. But the footage would never capture what Lena Castillo noticed first, the smell of wintergreen. Sharp, medicinal, rolling off his body in waves, the smell of a man holding something broken together with tape and sheer stubborn will. This is a story about what the cameras didn't show, and what happened after. The gym had been hers for 3 months. Not legally. Lena Castillo didn't own Ironside. She didn't even have a full membership. She had a work trade arrangement with the owner, a gravel-voiced woman named Maureen who let Lena train for free in exchange for cleaning the locker rooms at closing and restocking the towel bins at dawn. It was humiliating in the exact way that kept Lena disciplined. Every time she wiped down a bench still warm from someone else's body, she reminded herself that she had survived worse. She had. The scar on her left palm said so. A thin white line from the base of her index finger to her wrist, where a kitchen knife had slipped 3 years ago during the worst night of her life. She was 5'4", 118 pounds, half Filipino, half Irish, all fight. She wore her black hair in a braid so tight it pulled at her temples, and she trained in the same faded gray shirt every session because she only owned 2. Her discipline was Wing Chun, modified, practical. She had studied under a man named Sifu Reyes in Oxnard for 6 years before he died, and she had continued alone, hitting the heavy bag at Ironside with such quiet, metronomic precision that the regulars had stopped watching her weeks ago. They were watching now. Because Elias Cross was standing 4 feet from her bag, and his hand was still on it, and the chain was still swinging, and the wintergreen was so strong it stung her eyes. "You're in my space," he said. His voice was low, not quiet, low. The frequency of it traveled through the floor mats and into the bones of her feet. She felt it before she processed the words. Lena did not step back. She turned her head, looked at the hand on her bag, knuckles scarred, 3 fingers taped, a tremor so faint most people would miss it. And then she looked up, past the chest, past the neck, into gray eyes that had the flat, assessing quality of a man who had learned to categorize threats before he learned to read. "No," she said. "You're in mine." The gym exhaled. It was the wrong thing to say to a man like Elias Cross. Every person in that building knew it. The 2 powerlifters by the squat rack exchanged a glance. The front desk kid, a 20-year-old named Marco, put his hand on the phone beneath the counter. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder, as though the building itself was bracing. Elias tilted his head. 1 degree. The scar behind his ear caught the light, and Lena saw that it was newer than she'd first thought. Pink at the edges, still healing. His jaw worked once, twice, the muscles bunching and releasing like a fist being made and unmade. "Say that again," he said. "I don't repeat myself." She watched something move behind his eyes. Not anger. She had grown up around anger, had mapped its geography so thoroughly she could navigate it blindfolded. This was something else. Surprise, maybe. Or curiosity. The same look a dog gives a cat that doesn't run. He removed his hand from the bag. The chain settled. The wintergreen was everywhere, in her hair, on her tongue, coating the back of her throat. She would learn later that he used it compulsively. Wintergreen oil on his joints, wintergreen balm on his spine, wintergreen patches on the back of his neck where the nerve damage was worst. He was, in the most literal sense, held together by it. But in that moment she only knew that it burned, and that he was close enough to touch, and that she had absolutely no intention of moving. "Maureen know you're using the bag this late?" he asked. "Maureen gave me the key. Maureen gave me the corner. Then we have a scheduling conflict." His mouth did something that was not a smile. It was the first cousin of a smile, a contraction of muscles that suggested the machinery existed but hadn't been serviced in years. "You always talk to people twice your size like this? You always walk up to strangers and grab their equipment?" Behind them, Marco let out a breath he'd been holding for 30 seconds. Elias looked at her for a long time. She held it. She had learned from Sifu Reyes and from the kitchen and from the courtroom where she had lost custody of her daughter 18 months ago that the person who looks away first is the person who loses everything. He stepped back. One step. Controlled. His weight shifted with the practiced economy of someone whose body was a weapon he had been trained to deploy and restrain in equal measure. He lifted both hands, palms out, fingers spread, tremor visible now, undeniable, and he showed them to her. "Fair enough," he said. "Carry on." He turned and walked to the opposite corner of the gym, and Lena went back to hitting the bag with metronomic precision, and her hands were shaking, and the wintergreen stayed in her lungs for 3 hours after she left. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, he was already there when she arrived. Same corner, same shirt stretched to breaking across his back. He was doing something she didn't recognize, not lifting, not stretching, but standing in front of the mirror with his eyes closed, his arms at his sides, breathing in a pattern that she counted without meaning to. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out, military box breathing, modified. She would learn that too, later. She walked past him, set her bag down, wrapped her hands, started on the bag. 20 minutes passed without a word. It was the loudest silence she had ever experienced. She was aware of him the way you're aware of weather, not looking at it directly, but knowing at every moment whether it's approaching or retreating. His breathing was audible across the room. 478, 478. The wintergreen reached her in slow waves, each exhalation carrying it further. She hit the bag. Jab, cross, hook, cross. Step, reset. Again. He opened his eyes. She saw it in the mirror, his lids lifting, his gaze finding her reflection, holding it for exactly 2 beats before he looked away. On Thursday, the man named Dennis Rourke came in. Lena knew Rourke. Everyone at Ironside knew Rourke. He was the reason 2 women had canceled their memberships in the last 6 months. He was a personal trainer with a client list, a jaw full of veneers, and hands that found reasons to touch you during every conversation. He had corrected Lena's form once without asking, his palm flat on her lower back, his fingers curving over her hip. She had removed his hand the way you remove a spider from a wall, quickly, with controlled revulsion, and he had laughed and called her uptight. He had also, she would learn much later, been the one who sent the anonymous email to family court. She didn't know that yet. She only knew that he walked in on Thursday evening, saw her on the bag, and made a line straight for her. "Lena, legs are too narrow on that cross. Let me show you." "No, thank you. Seriously, you're losing power. Just let me adjust your stance." I said no. He reached for her hip. The sound that came from the far corner of the gym was not a word. It was a frequency, something between a growl and the creak of a load-bearing wall about to give. Dennis Rourke's hand stopped in the air as though it had hit glass. Elias Cross was standing now. He hadn't moved toward them. He hadn't needed to. He had simply stood up, and the geometry of the room had rearranged itself around the fact of him. "She said no," Elias said, nothing else. 2 words, the same low frequency that traveled through the floor. Rourke turned, processed the 300 pounds, processed the scar, the tape, the flat gray eyes, processed his own mortality in a single efficient calculation. "We're just talking, man." "You're done talking." Rourke looked at Lena. She looked at the bag. He walked away. She heard his sneakers squeak against the rubber floor, rapid and retreating, and she heard the front door open and close, and then it was quiet again. She turned to Elias. "I didn't need that." "I know. I can handle him." "I know that too." "Then why did you do it?" He sat back down, closed his eyes, resumed breathing. 478. Because I wanted to, he said. It was not an apology. It was not a justification. It was a statement of fact delivered with the same precision he applied to everything. His breathing, his stance, the careful way he taped his tremoring fingers every morning. He wanted to, so he did. And he was telling her that directly, without performance, without expectation of gratitude. She went back to the bag. The wintergreen was stronger that night. She tasted it in her sleep. On Friday, he learned her name. She didn't give it to him. Marco did. She was restocking the towel bins at 6 in the morning, hair still wet from a shower in the women's locker room, wearing the same gray shirt she had trained in the night before because she hadn't had time to wash it. Elias walked in for the early session. She didn't know he trained twice a day, but she should have guessed from the size of him. And he nodded at Marco. And Marco, who was 20 and eager and had absolutely no sense of discretion, said, "Morning, Commander. Lena's already here. She's always first in." Elias stopped walking. "Lena," he said, not to her, to himself, testing the weight of it in his mouth. She straightened up from the towel bin and found him watching her. In daylight, or what passed for daylight under the gym's industrial overheads, he looked different, older, tireder. The shadows under his eyes were the color of old bruises, and the tremor in his right hand was worse than it had been Tuesday night. "Commander," she said, because Marco had given her that too, and two could play. "Elias, Lena, I know. Marco has a big mouth. Marco has a generous spirit," she said. "There's a difference." That almost smile again. Closer this time, a degree nearer to the real thing. "You train here every day?" he asked. "I clean here every day. I train here every night." "Work trade?" "Yes." He nodded. No judgment, no pity. She had been braced for both, and their absence disoriented her more than their presence would have. "What discipline?" he asked. "Wing Chun. Modified." She looked at him sharply. "You could tell? Your centerline work is textbook. Your footwork isn't. You've adapted it for someone who fights people bigger than you, which is everyone. You watch me. I watch everything." He held up his right hand. The tremor was visible even from 6 feet away. "It's the only part of the job I can still do." He walked past her toward the weight floor, and the wintergreen swept over her like a tide, and she stood in the towel bin area with an armful of clean white cotton and realized that her heart was beating in a pattern she had not authorized. On Saturday, Maureen told her. Maureen was behind the front desk, drinking black coffee from a thermos that looked like it had survived 2 wars and a divorce, which it had. She was 63, built like a mailbox, and she had run Ironside for 22 years. She was also the only person in Lena's current life who knew about the custody case. "You know who he is," Maureen said. It was not a question. Navy SEAL, commander, retired, I'm guessing. Medically separated. 18 months ago. Lena set down the spray bottle she was using on the front counter. "What happened?" "Classified is what they told his family. What I heard from a friend at Balboa is TBI, traumatic brain injury, blast exposure. He did 9 deployments, Lena. 9. His neurologist put him on restricted activity 6 months before they finally pulled him. He refused to stop. He was running operations with a brain bleed." "A brain bleed." "Microhemorrhages. Ongoing. The wintergreen is for the nerve pain. His hands shake because the signals from his brain to his fingers are degrading. It's progressive." Lena's throat closed. She swallowed against it hard. "Progressive means what?" "Means it gets worse. Means the tremor becomes paralysis, and the headaches become seizures, and one day he collapses and doesn't get back up, unless they find a treatment that works. He's tried 4, none have held." Lena picked the spray bottle back up and wiped the counter in slow circles. She did not look at Maureen. She did not trust what her face was doing. "He asked about you," Maureen said. "What did he ask?" "If you were safe." Lena's hand stopped moving. "Safe from what?" "He didn't specify. He just asked if you were safe, and when I said you were, he said good, and he went back to the floor." Lena finished wiping the counter. She restocked 3 towel bins. She swept the locker room. She did all of it with the wintergreen ghost taste on her tongue, and Maureen's words playing in a loop she could not stop. "He asked if you were safe." On Sunday, the gym was closed, and she sat in her studio apartment with her phone on the table and her daughter's school photo taped to the wall above the sink. And she did not call anyone, and she did not go anywhere, and the absence of Wintergreen felt like a missing tooth. On Monday night she arrived at 6:30, and he was already on the bag. Her bag. He was hitting it with his left hand only. His right hung at his side, the tremor so pronounced now that his fingers were curling involuntarily, the tape around them dark with sweat. Each strike was controlled, technical, devastatingly precise. He hit the bag the way she imagined he had once hit doors, walls, men, problems, with absolute commitment and no wasted motion. She watched from the doorway for 10 seconds. Then she walked to the bag, positioned herself on the opposite side, and braced it with both hands. He stopped mid-strike. His fist was 6 inches from the leather. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Holding the bag. Your angles are drifting because nobody's giving you resistance. I didn't ask you to hold it. I didn't ask you to scare off Dennis Rourke. We're even." He looked at her over the top of the bag. This close, she could see the details, the micro scars on his forehead, too small and too many to be from anything other than repeated blast exposure. The way his left pupil was slightly larger than his right. The wintergreen was so dense between them it made her eyes water. "If I hit this bag at full power," he said, "it will knock you backward." "Then don't hit it at full power." He stared at her. She stared back. Sifu Reyes had called it root, the ability to plant yourself so completely that the earth itself would have to move before you did. Elias pulled his strike. She felt the impact travel through the leather, through her palms, up her arms, into her shoulders. It was like catching a wave, not the force itself, but the echo of what it could have been. He was holding back, deliberately, calibrating his power down to a level that would challenge her without hurting her. He hit it again. She braced, again, braced, again. They fell into a rhythm. His strikes, her resistance. His exhalations carried wintergreen across the top of the bag and into her face, and she breathed it in, and it stopped stinging. It started to feel like something else, like a signal, like a frequency she was learning to tune to. 10 minutes. 15. His left arm never tired. His right hand never stopped trembling. "You should ice that," she said during a pause. "I should do a lot of things. Your extensor tendons are compensating for the nerve damage. If you don't manage the inflammation, you'll lose grip strength in the left hand, too." He lowered his fist. "You know about nerve damage." "I know about hands." She held up her left palm and showed him the scar, the thin white line from index finger to wrist. "Kitchen knife. Severed the digital nerve at the base of my index finger. I did 6 months of occupational therapy to get full sensation back." He looked at her scar the way she imagined he looked at maps, reading it, memorizing it, filing it. "Did you get it back?" he asked. "Full sensation?" 90%. The last 10 comes and goes. What does the missing 10 feel like? Static, like the channel isn't quite tuned. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Not pity, recognition. The face of a person seeing their own condition reflected in someone else's body for the first time. "I know that feeling," he said quietly. "I know you do." She held the bag. He hit it. Neither of them spoke again until closing, and when she locked up and walked to her car, her palms were buzzing with the memory of impact, and the wintergreen was in her skin, and she sat in the driver's seat for 4 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. On Wednesday of the second week, the bag wasn't enough. She arrived to find him sitting on the bench by the water fountain, his right hand in his lap, his left pressing a wintergreen patch to the back of his neck. His eyes were closed, his breathing was wrong. Shallow, irregular, nothing like the 4-7-8 pattern she had memorized. "Bad day?" she asked, setting her bag down. "Bad year." He opened his eyes. They were bloodshot. The left pupil was blown wider than before. "I had a scan this morning. The microhemorrhages are spreading." She sat down on the bench beside him, not touching, 3 inches of space between her knee and his thigh. She could feel the heat of him across that gap, 300 pounds of metabolic furnace running at full capacity, burning through itself. What did the doctor say? Same thing they always say. Reduce stress, avoid impact. Consider experimental treatment number 5, which has a 30% chance of working and a 15% chance of making it worse. What do you say? He turned his head and looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, his eyes were not flat. They were not assessing. They were open in a way that made her chest hurt, because she recognized that too, the look of someone who is very tired of being strong. I say, I'm running out of time, Lena. She reached across the 3 inches of space and placed her hand on his forearm. She didn't grab, didn't squeeze, just placed it there, her palm against the corded muscle, her fingers resting above the tape, contact so light he could break it by breathing. The tremor in his right hand stopped. Not gradually, not with effort. It stopped, like a switch had been flipped, like her touch had found the frayed wire and held the connection. They both looked at his hand. How long has it been since someone touched you? She asked. His jaw worked, the muscles bunched and released. 14 months. Elias. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't say my name like that unless you mean it. I mean it. She kept her hand on his forearm. He kept his eyes on his own, still, open, tremor-free right hand. The wintergreen burned between them like a lit fuse. May I check something? She asked. What? Your neck, where the patch is. I want to feel the muscle tension. He didn't answer immediately. He turned his head back toward her, searched her face with those gray, bloodshot eyes, and then he nodded once. She stood, moved behind the bench, placed both hands on the back of his neck, on either side of the patch. The skin was hot, not warm, hot. Inflammation, systemic, running like a current beneath the surface. She found the muscles she was looking for, the suboccipitals, the deep cervical extensors, and they were locked solid, stone beneath skin. You're clenching these 24 hours a day, she said. Can't stop. When did your last physical therapist fire you? I fired her. She wanted me to stop training. And you won't. If I stop, I'm not me anymore. I'm just a man who used to be something. Her thumbs found the occipital ridge at the base of his skull and pressed. Firm, targeted. The same pressure points Sifu Reyes had taught her for recovery work. Not soft, not gentle, but precise. Clinical, safe. Elias made a sound. It was not a groan. It was the sound of something structural releasing. A beam that had been bearing weight for years suddenly allowed to rest. Lena, I'm here. Your hands. I know. His tremor stayed gone for 45 minutes. She counted. When it returned, it was softer. A whisper instead of a shout. On Thursday, she brought a small bottle of wintergreen oil from the drugstore and worked it into her own hands before she touched him, so the smell was coming from both of them, so it was no longer just his damage she was breathing, but something shared, something they built together in the space between his neck and her palms. He didn't ask her to come back Friday. She came back anyway. On Saturday morning, Maureen watched them from behind the counter. Elias sitting on the bench, Lena standing behind him, her hands on his neck, the wintergreen joining them in a cloud that made Marco sneeze from 15 feet away. And Maureen said nothing, but she refilled her thermos twice, and the second time she passed Lena on the way to the towel bins, she said, "Be careful with him." I'm always careful. I'm not talking about his neck. Lena restocked the bins and didn't answer. On Tuesday of the 3rd week, the gym was empty at closing, and Lena was locking the front door, and Elias was still inside. He was sitting on the floor of the back room, the small, windowless space Maureen used for storage, where the spare mats were stacked and the broken treadmill had been slowly dying for 3 years. He was sitting with his back against the wall and his knees drawn up and his head in his hands, and his breathing was wrong again, fast, ragged, the pattern of a man whose body was in revolt. She locked the front door behind her, turned off the overheads in the main gym, and walked to the back room. The only light was the bare bulb above the storage shelves. It turned everything amber. It turned the wintergreen into something visible. She could almost see it in the air between them, golden and sharp. Elias, he looked up. His eyes were wet, and she understood with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had sat on a bathroom floor at 2 a.m. and cried until her body was empty, that she was the first person to see him like this. Seizure, he said. Small one. While you were cleaning. I didn't want anyone to... He stopped, reset. I didn't want Marco to see. But you're okay with me seeing. I'm not okay with any of it. but you're the only person who touches me and the shaking stops, and right now I need the shaking to stop." She knelt in front of him, close, her knees between his boots. She took his right hand and held it between both of hers, and the tremor fought her. It was worse than she had ever felt, violent, the muscles firing in patterns that made no neurological sense, and she held on, and she pressed her thumbs into his palm, into the thenar eminence, into the pressure point between his thumb and index finger, and she waited. 30 seconds, a minute, 90 seconds. The tremor stopped. His hand was still in hers. His fingers were large enough to wrap around both her wrists if he chose. He didn't choose. He kept his hand open, his fingers relaxed, and she held him. "How do you do that?" he asked. "I don't know." Sifu Reyes used to say that some people's nervous systems speak the same language, resonance without sound. That's not very scientific. Neither is surviving 9 deployments with a brain bleed. His breath left him in a rush that was almost a laugh. Almost. The machinery grinding toward something human. "Lena." "Yes." "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "The scar on your hand, you said kitchen knife. You didn't say accident." Her chest tightened. She looked down at their joined hands, his massive scarred still, hers small scarred still. 2 broken instruments, perfectly calibrated to each other. "It wasn't an accident," she said, "but I didn't do it to myself." She felt his fingers curl. Not around her, around the information, processing it the way he processed everything, categorizing the threat. "Who?" he said. "My ex-husband, Raphael. He found out I was filing for custody of our daughter and he lost control. He grabbed the knife off the counter and I put my hand up and he went through it." She paused, "And then I took the knife away from him and I held it. And he called the police and told them I had attacked him with it. And when they arrived, my blood was on the blade and his wasn't, and they believed him. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, full of the wintergreen, full of the amber light, full of the enormous shaking effort Elias Cross was making to remain seated against that wall instead of standing up and finding a man named Raphael and ending him. "You lost custody," he said. 18 months ago, emergency order. He claimed I was violent, unstable, a danger to our daughter. The court believed him because of the arrest record and because his lawyer was better than my public defender. I haven't seen Mia in 14 months. Mia, she's 6. She likes dinosaurs and the color yellow and she sings in the bath. Lena's voice cracked on the last word, and she hated it, hated the fracture, hated the way grief could ambush you in a storage room on a Tuesday when you were supposed to be brave. "I'm sorry, I don't do this, I don't tell people this." His free hand came up. He did not touch her face. He held his palm an inch from her cheek, close enough that she could feel the heat, the faint disturbance of air, the intention without the action. And he waited. "May the 1st?" he asked. She nodded. His palm settled against her cheek. It was rough, calloused, warm in a way that had nothing to do with inflammation and everything to do with tenderness that had been buried so long it came up blinking, disoriented, unsure of itself. She closed her eyes. "I'm going to help you get her back," he said. "You don't know me. I know you show up every day. I know you clean this gym before dawn and train alone after dark. I know you walked up to a man twice your size and didn't move. And I know your hands can stop a seizure, so don't tell me I don't know you, because I know everything I need." She opened her eyes. He was close. The wintergreen was a living thing between them, not a barrier anymore, not a signal of damage, but a shared atmosphere, a climate they had built together. "Elias, yeah." Your hand stopped shaking again. He looked down. She was right. Both hands, the right she was holding, the left that was against her cheek, were perfectly still. Not a tremor, not a flicker. "It stops when I touch you," he said. "It stops when we touch each other." The distinction mattered. She saw him register it, the difference between his body responding to her and their bodies responding to each other. Mutual, reciprocal, a circuit that required both connections to close. He dropped his hand from her cheek. She released his hand. The tremor came back in 11 seconds. She counted. "This is going to get complicated," he said. "It's already complicated. I'm dying, Lena. You're alive right now." He looked at her, and whatever he saw on her face was enough, because he nodded once, and she stood up, and she offered him her hand, and he took it, and she pulled, and he rose, all 300 pounds of him, rising on the strength of a woman half his size who refused to let go. She drove home. The wintergreen was in her skin. She pressed her palm to her own cheek, where his hand had been, and held it there for a long time in the dark of her car. On Thursday of the 3rd week, the dam broke. She arrived at closing. The gym was empty except for Elias, who was standing in the back room with the lights already dimmed, and the look on his face was not pain and not need and not desperation. It was focus. The same focus she had seen him bring to the bag, to his breathing, to every disciplined structure he used to keep himself upright. But this focus was aimed at her. "I need to tell you something," he said. She set her bag down, closed the storage room door behind her. The click of the latch was very loud. "Tell me." "The tremor is getting worse. My last scan showed new hemorrhages. My neurologist wants to put me in an inpatient program, which means I won't be here. I don't know for how long." She felt the floor shift beneath her. Not physically. The mats were solid. The concrete beneath them was solid. But the ground she had built under her own feet in the past 3 weeks, the routine of him, the clockwork of arrival and departure, the certainty that he would be there and the wintergreen would be there and the stopping of the shaking would be there, that ground moved. "When?" she said. "Next week." "Okay." "It's not okay. We both know it's not okay. What do you want me to say?" He stepped closer. One step, controlled, his weight shifting with that practiced economy. "I want you to say that when I come back, you'll still be here. I'll still be here. I want you to say that what happens between us, this, whatever this is, doesn't stop because I'm in a hospital bed. It doesn't stop." He took another step. The space between them contracted to inches. She could feel the heat of him along the entire front of her body, and the wintergreen was so thick she could taste it on her lips, and his hands were shaking, both of them, and she reached up and took them. The tremor stopped. "Lena." "Yes." "I haven't been with anyone in over 2 years. I need you to understand that what I'm about to say is not casual, and it's not adrenaline, and it's not because I'm scared of a hospital. I want you, and I have wanted you since you told me I was in your space, and I need you to tell me if that's something you want, because I will not take a single step you don't choose." Her heart was hammering. Not with fear. She was done with fear, had burned through her lifetime supply of it on a kitchen floor 3 years ago. This was something else. This was the feeling of standing at the edge of a choice that would change the shape of every day that came after. "I choose this," she said. "I choose you. Tell me what you want. I need the words. I want you to kiss me, and then I want more than that. And I need you to know that I'm not fragile, Elias. I've been treated like something breakable by every man who's ever been in my life, and I am not. I'm choosing this with open eyes." He released her hands. He cupped her face, both palms against her jaw, his fingers in her hair, the braid coming loose under the pressure of him. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. She felt the calluses, the scars, the tape on his fingers, the absolute absence of tremor. "If anything is wrong," he said, "if anything is too much, you say stop and I stop. Not slow down, stop. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Say it back to me." Stop means stop, completely. He kissed her. His mouth was warm and tasted like wintergreen. Of course it did. Everything about him did. And the kiss was not soft. It was not tentative. It was the kiss of a man who had spent 3 weeks memorizing her from across a room and was now reading her up close, with his lips, with his tongue, with the pressure of his jaw against hers. She grabbed the front of his shirt with both fists and pulled, and he came forward, and his body pressed hers against the storage room door, and the weight of him was immense and careful and exactly right. She felt him everywhere, the breadth of his chest against hers, the hard plane of his stomach, his thigh between her legs, deliberate, steady, the pressure of it drawing a sound from her throat that she didn't plan and couldn't stop. His hands left her face and traveled, one to the small of her back, pulling her closer, one to her hip, gripping hard enough that she felt each individual finger but not hard enough to bruise. "This okay?" he said against her mouth. "Don't stop." He pulled back, 1 inch. His eyes searched hers, and whatever consent he was looking for, he found it, because his hand moved from her hip to the hem of her shirt and paused there. "Yes," she said before he could ask. He pulled her shirt up and over her head in one motion, and the air hit her skin, and his eyes dropped to the scar on her collarbone she hadn't told him about. Another gift from Raphael, a cigarette burn, faded to white, and his jaw tightened, and he bent his head and pressed his mouth to it. Not a kiss, a seal, a promise. She pulled at his shirt. It took both hands and significant effort because the fabric fought the terrain of him, and when it came free, she put her palms flat against his chest and felt his heartbeat. Strong, steady, the one system in his body that hadn't betrayed him yet. His skin was hot, the wintergreen was coming off him in waves, rising from his pores, and she pressed her face to his chest and breathed it in, and it was no longer medicinal. It was his. It was them. His hands found the clasp at her back and stopped. Lena. Yes. Yes, as in, keep going? Yes, as in, if you stop now, I will never forgive you. His breath left him in a rush against her hair, and his fingers undid the clasp, and the fabric fell away, and his hands replaced it. Palms against her bare skin. The contrast of his size against hers made visible in the way his hand spanned her entire ribcage, his thumb resting beneath her breast, the warmth of him against the cold air making her gasp. She reached for his belt. He caught her wrist, not hard, not restraining, but checking. You're sure, he said. Not a question, a calibration. Elias, I am a grown woman who hasn't been touched by someone she chose in 3 years. I am sure, I am certain, and I need you to stop asking me and start trusting what I've already told you. Something broke open behind his eyes. Not pain, relief. The relief of a man who had been holding himself in check for so long that permission felt like oxygen. He picked her up, both hands under her thighs, her legs around his waist, her back against the door. The shift in position pressed them together in a way that made her fingers dig into his shoulders, and he groaned. Low, deep, the frequency of it traveling through both their bodies, and his mouth found her neck, her collarbone, the space between her breasts. She got his belt open. He helped her, one-handed, the other arm holding her weight as though she were nothing. His right hand, his damaged, tremoring, failing right hand, was perfectly still against her thigh. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. It stops when I'm touching you, he said. Then don't stop touching me. He carried her to the stacked mats in the corner, set her down, followed her. The mat was firm beneath her back, and he was above her, and the bare bulb turned his body amber and gold, and the wintergreen was everywhere. In her mouth, on her skin, between them like a shared language that needed no translation. She pushed his pants down his hips. He helped. She removed her own, and his hands were on her legs, tracing the muscle she had built in 3 months of bag work, and his mouth followed his hands, and she arched into him, and the sound she made was not quiet. He paused at the inside of her thigh. Tell me what you want. I want you closer. How close? All the way. He came up, positioned himself, and stopped, forehead against hers, breath mingling, wintergreen and sweat and heat. Look at me. She looked, gray eyes, wide open, bloodshot, beautiful. I'm here, she said. I'm here, I'm choosing this, I'm choosing you, now please. He moved. She felt the stretch of him, the fullness, the impossibility of their size difference made irrelevant by the care he took. Slow, measured, adjusting to her responses the way he adjusted his strikes on the bag, reading resistance and yielding to it. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him down, and he came, and the weight of him settled over her like gravity given a name. They moved together, not fast. They had both been alone too long for fast, both been starved enough to want every second to register. His hand found hers, their fingers interlaced, her scar against his calluses, and the tremor that should have been there was gone, completely gone. His body was steady and strong, and present in a way she felt in her spine, in her hips, in the sound of her own breathing, which had synced to his without her meaning to. 478, 478, even here, even now. The rhythm held. He murmured her name against her throat. She said his into the space between his shoulder and his jaw. The wintergreen was salt now, mixed with sweat, the sharp edge of it softened by proximity, by skin, by the fact that she was tasting it from the source. She felt herself building toward something, a wave she recognized but hadn't felt in years, and she pressed her face into his neck and held on, and he felt it. The change in her breathing, the tension in her legs around his waist, and he adjusted, and she came apart beneath him with a cry she muffled against his skin, and he followed her 30 seconds later with his face pressed into her hair and both hands gripping hers, still and steady, not a tremor in either. They lay on the mats in the amber light, breathing. His arm was across her stomach. His face was turned toward her. The wintergreen settled around them in slow, fading waves. "Lena, don't say something noble." "I was going to say your hair is completely ruined." She laughed. A real laugh startled out of her, and she felt his chest shake with something that was not a tremor and not a seizure but laughter, unused, rusty, resurrected. He pulled her close. She let him. His chin on the top of her head, her face against his chest, his heartbeat in her ear. She counted the beats the way she counted everything about him, meticulously, with the attention of someone who understood that everything worth having could be taken. He fell asleep in 4 minutes. She knew because she counted. She lay in his arms in the back room of Ironside Gym with the bare bulb buzzing above them and the wintergreen cooling on their skin, and she did not sleep. She traced the scars on his forearms, one by one, reading them the way he had read her palm, with attention, with care, with the understanding that damage and survival were written in the same hand. At 3 a.m. he woke. His right hand was tremoring again, faintly, and she took it, and it stopped, and he looked at her. "You stayed," he said. "I said I would." Most people say a lot of things. I'm not most people. No. He brought her hand to his mouth and pressed his lips to the scar on her palm. "You're not." He got dressed. She got dressed. He walked her to her car and stood in the parking lot while she started the engine. And when she looked at him in the rearview mirror, 300 pounds of man standing under a security light, right hand in his pocket to hide the shaking, left hand raised in a gesture that was not a wave but a promise, she understood that she was in trouble, the kind of trouble you don't want to escape from. The kind that smells like wintergreen and feels like stillness, and sounds like your name in a voice that travels through the floor. She drove home. She pressed her palm to her cheek. She did not sleep, and the wintergreen stayed in her lungs until morning, and she was not afraid. She was afraid by Tuesday. Not of him. Never of him. Of herself. Of the way her body remembered his hands before her brain finished waking. Of the way she caught herself pressing her palm against her own sternum in the middle of a shift, searching for the pressure that wasn't there and finding the absence worse than the wanting. She had called in sick for the first time in 2 years on Monday. She had lain on her apartment floor with the windows open and the ceiling fan turning and the wintergreen fading from her skin by degrees, and she had replayed every word, every breath, every micro-permission, tell me to stop and hear and stay, until her pulse was a metronome ticking out a rhythm she didn't choose, and when she finally got up to shower, she'd pressed her forehead against the tile and said his name out loud, just to hear what it sounded like in an empty room. It sounded like an admission. By Tuesday she was back at work, moving through the physical therapy clinic on muscle memory, adjusting angles, counting reps, correcting form. Her hands knew what to do. Her brain was somewhere else entirely. It was in the back room of Ironside Gym, and it would not come home. At noon, Delia walked into the break room, took one look at her, and sat down. Delia was 53, twice divorced, and operated with the precision of a woman who had survived everything and found most of it funny. She was the senior therapist at the clinic. She had trained Elena. She had also, on 3 separate occasions, given romantic advice so blunt it bordered on assault. "You slept with the giant," Delia said. Elena dropped her water bottle. "What?" "You have that look. The one where your mouth says I'm fine, but your neck is doing that splotchy thing it does when you're replaying something physical. Sit down." "I'm standing." "Sit down." Elena sat. Delia crossed her arms. "Scale of 1 to 10, how mortified are you right now?" 11. "Good. That means it mattered. Now tell me the problem." "There's no problem." "Elena Maria Vasquez, you called in sick yesterday for the first time since you had actual pneumonia, and today you've been adjusting Mr. Henderson's knee brace like it personally offended you. There is a problem. Speak." Elena put her face in her hands. "I don't know what to do now." "About what?" "About going back. About seeing him. About the fact that I want to see him so badly my hands are shaking and I'm supposed to be the one with steady hands. That's literally my job and I can't. She stopped, breathed. I don't know how to want something this much and not ruin it. Delia studied her for a long moment. Then she leaned forward. How big is he? Delia, I'm asking structurally, therapeutically, how big? 300 pounds. 6'3". Delia whistled. And the tremor? The one you mentioned a few weeks back, the veteran with the nerve damage? That's him. And instead of treating him professionally, you ended up in the back room of his gym with the door locked and the lights off. Delia leaned back. Her expression shifted from interrogation to something warmer, something almost maternal, except Delia would have slapped anyone who called her maternal. Honey, you didn't ruin anything. You're just scared because it was good, and good things have historically been taken from you. That's not wisdom. That's trauma wearing a lab coat. Elena's throat tightened. So what do I do? Go back. And say what? Delia grinned. Nothing. You show up. You work on his hand. You let him see that you came back on purpose in daylight, sober, with full knowledge of what happened, and you are not running. That's the thing men like that need more than anything else, not words, presence, repetition, proof. And if he's weird about it? He won't be. The ones who ask permission first are never weird after. They're grateful, sometimes annoyingly so. Delia paused. But if you really want to settle the power dynamic, I'll give you the same advice I gave my niece when she married that firefighter who outweighed her by 100 pounds. What? Exhaust him. Elena stared. I'm serious. Men that size, men who control everything, who hold themselves in check every second of every day because they know what they're capable of. They don't know how to let go. They don't know how to stop guarding. You want him to actually rest, you wear him out. You make him feel so safe in your hands that his body gives up before his brain does. You exhaust him, Elena, physically, thoroughly, repeatedly, until he sleeps like a man who doesn't have nightmares. That is the most inappropriate workplace advice I have ever received. You're welcome. Now go fix Mr. Henderson's brace before he files a complaint. Elena went back to Ironside that night. She didn't call ahead. She parked in the same spot, walked through the same door, and found him in the same place. The heavy bag, the wraps, the controlled violence that looked choreographed until you noticed his right hand dropping lower with each round, the tremor stealing precision in real time. He saw her and stopped. The bag swung. The gym noise continued. Elena stood in the doorway with her clinic bag over her shoulder and her hair still damp from the shower she'd taken before coming, and she watched him watch her, and she did not look away. I'm here for your hand, she said. His jaw worked. My hand. Your right hand, the one you've been hiding in your pocket, the one that's getting worse. I'm here to work on it because that is what I do, and you need help whether you want to admit it or not. He unwrapped his left hand slowly, then his right. She saw the tremor from across the room, worse than last week, rhythmic and involuntary. The kind of thing that would have any other person gripping furniture to hide it. He held it up and let her see. Okay, he said. She crossed the gym. She took his hand. She turned it over, pressed her thumbs into the thenar eminence, felt the muscles firing in erratic bursts, and she did what she was trained to do. She became clinical, became precise, became the version of herself that could touch a man's body without remembering what it felt like pressed against hers in the dark. It lasted about 4 minutes. Then he said, "You smell like wintergreen," and his voice did that thing, that low-register vibration that traveled through her fingers and into her wrists, and she looked up, and he was looking at her the way he had looked at her before everything started, before the back room and the locked door and the sound of her own voice breaking on a single word, with focus, with gravity, with the absolute concentrated attention of a man who had been trained to assess threats and had instead found something worth protecting. I brought it for you, she said, the wintergreen, for the nerve inflammation. You came back for my hand. I came back for you. The hand is my excuse. He breathed out. Elena. Don't make it a big thing. I'm here, you're here, your hand is getting worse, and I'm the only person in this city with the training and the motivation to fix it. Let me do my job. Your job. My job. He looked at her for another long moment. Then he stepped back, and the space between them opened, and she felt the loss of his heat against her forearms, and she understood with absolute clarity that Delia was right. She was going to have to exhaust this man. She started with his hand. Properly this time, with the portable TENS unit she'd brought, and the neuromuscular techniques she'd spent 6 years learning. She worked on him in the back room. The same room, same bare bulb, same folding table, and she was professional for 37 minutes. She documented his grip strength. She measured his finger abduction. She noted the pattern of the tremor, worse in the 4th and 5th digits, consistent with ulnar nerve compression complicated by what she suspected was central sensitization from prolonged stress. He sat still and let her work and answered her questions, and did not touch her beyond what the examination required. At minute 38 she finished her notes and looked up and said, "How long since you've slept through the night?" "Counting Saturday?" "Before Saturday?" 14 months. "And Saturday?" "I slept 4 hours straight. That hasn't happened since my last deployment." "Because you were exhausted. Because you were there." She put down her pen. He was sitting on the edge of the folding table with his hands on his thighs, and the wintergreen she'd applied was catching the light on his knuckles, and his right hand was still tremoring faintly, and he was looking at her with an expression that was not desire, not yet, but something adjacent to it, something that lived in the space between need and permission, between wanting and waiting. "Cole, yeah. I want to be here. I need you to know that. I'm not here because I feel obligated or because I pity you, or because I got caught up in something, Saturday, and don't know how to walk it back. I want to be in this room with you. I want to work on your hand. I want to stay after. After. She stepped between his knees. His thighs bracketed her hips, and even seated he was eye level with her, and the scale of him should have been intimidating, but instead it was gravitational, it was shelter, it was the feeling of standing next to a wall that the wind could not get through. "Is that okay?" He raised his right hand, tremoring, imprecise, and held it in the air near her jaw without making contact. "Tell me where." She turned her face into his palm and pressed. The tremor stopped against her skin. "There," she said. He kissed her. Different from Saturday. Saturday had been exploration, negotiation, the careful architecture of two people building consent in real time. This was knowledge. This was the kiss of a man who had learned her mouth and remembered every lesson, who knew that she rose on her toes when he pulled her closer, and that her breath caught when his thumb found the hinge of her jaw. She put her hands on his chest and pushed him flat on the table. He went. 300 pounds of trained combat veteran, and he went down because she pushed, and the look on his face was not surprise but surrender, and she climbed onto the table and onto him and felt the whole structure groan beneath their combined weight, and she did not care. She kissed his throat, his jaw, the scar above his left eyebrow. She peeled his shirt up and pressed her mouth to his sternum, and the wintergreen was on her lips now, mixing with his sweat, and she tasted it on every inch of skin she found. She traced the topography of him, the thick slabs of muscle across his chest, the ridged terrain of old injuries, the places where his body had been broken and had healed thicker, stronger, the way bone does, the way people do. "Elena," his voice was wrecked. "Slow down." "No, I'm trying to..." "I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to be careful. You're trying to be controlled. You're trying to make sure I'm okay before you let yourself want anything." She sat up, straddling his waist, and pulled her own shirt over her head, and the cool air hit her skin, and his eyes tracked her body with an intensity that made her stomach clench. "I'm okay. I'm more than okay. Stop holding back." His hands found her hips. She felt each finger individually, the left hand steady, the right hand faintly tremoring against her skin, and the contrast was devastating, the proof that he could not fully control his own body and was offering it to her anyway. She rocked against him and watched his jaw clench and his head tip back, and she thought, this is what Delia meant. Not dominance, not performance. Presence so relentless that vigilance becomes unnecessary. She undid his belt. He lifted his hips to help her, and the table creaked, and she laughed. And the laugh surprised both of them because laughter had not been part of Saturday. Saturday had been reverent and slow and a little bit terrified, and this was something else. This was joy. This was the sound of two people who had decided to stop being careful. "If this table breaks," he said, "then we use the floor. The floor is concrete. I've worked on worse surfaces." He laughed, low, startled, genuine. She'd heard him laugh exactly once before, and she collected this one like currency, like proof of purchase, like evidence that the man underneath her was not just a body, but a person who could be surprised by happiness. She took him inside her, and his hands tightened on her hips, and the tremor in his right hand vanished completely, and she filed that away, the clinical part of her brain still working, still taking notes, still tracking the correlation between emotional safety and neurological symptom reduction. And then the clinical part shut down because he sat up and wrapped his arms around her and pressed his mouth to her collarbone, and she stopped thinking entirely. She set the pace. He let her. Every few seconds his hands would drift toward her hair, her throat, the small of her back, and each time he would pause, fractionally, giving her the space to redirect or refuse, and each time she would press into the touch, granting permission through motion rather than words. And the rhythm they built was not frantic but thorough, not desperate but relentless. She wore him out. It took a while. The man had the stamina of someone who had spent 2 decades training his body to outlast everything. And she considered this a professional challenge, and she met it with the same methodical determination she brought to every clinical problem. Incremental, adaptive, patient. When he finally broke, it was with her name, not a shout, a statement. 3 syllables spoken into her shoulder with the absolute conviction of a man reciting coordinates, fixed points, something true and permanent and navigable. She held him through it and then held him after, and his full weight settled against her, enormous and warm, and the table did not break, and she was viciously glad about that because the floor really was concrete. He fell asleep in her arms. Not in 4 minutes this time, in 2. His breathing slowed, his muscles released in sequence. Shoulders first, then back, then arms, then hands, and his right hand stopped tremoring entirely, curled loosely around her hip, and she sat there on a folding table in the back room of Ironside Gym at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, with a sleeping giant in her lap and wintergreen on her tongue, and thought, "I am going to fix his hand. I know what's wrong with it. And I cannot tell him yet because the information that will save him is the same information that will make him send me away." She stayed until 2 a.m. He woke once, found her still there, and pulled her down beside him on the table. They lay face to face in the narrow space, and his arm was a barricade between her and the edge, and his breath was warm on her forehead. "Stay," he said. "I'll stay. In the morning. I'll be here in the morning." He slept. She watched. And in the early hours, when the gym was silent and the bare bulb had burned out, and the only light was the orange glow of the parking lot filtering through the high windows, she studied his right hand where it rested between them, and counted the intervals of the tremor, and confirmed what she had suspected since the first night she'd touched him. It was not just nerve damage. It was not just compression. The pattern was too rhythmic, too consistent, too specifically localized to the ulnar distribution. She had seen this exact presentation once before, in a case study from Walter Reed, in a patient who had been exposed to a specific chemical compound during a classified operation, a compound that caused progressive peripheral neuropathy that mimicked mechanical injury but was, in fact, toxic. Cole's hand was not failing because of overuse. It was failing because someone had poisoned him slowly over time, and the damage was accelerating. And if it continued unchecked, it would spread from his hand to his arm to his shoulder and eventually to his diaphragm, and he would die. She knew this because she had spent 3 years working at the VA hospital in San Diego before the incident, before her license had been suspended, before a patient had died on her table, and the investigation had found irregularities in her treatment records, and the board had concluded that she had administered an unauthorized protocol that had caused the death, and she had been stripped of her certification and relocated to a civilian clinic where she worked as a technician, not a therapist, doing the same work with none of the authority. And the wintergreen she carried was the only thing left from her previous life, the same brand, the same concentration, the same scent that had been in the room when Marcus Webb had coded on her table and she had tried to save him and failed. Marcus Webb, who had the same tremor, the same pattern, The same mysterious ulnar neuropathy that no one could explain. Marcus Webb, whose death had been ruled her fault. Marcus Webb, who had been one of Cole's teammates. She had not known that when she'd first come to Ironside. She had come because the gym offered free sessions for veterans, and she had been trying to rebuild her career in the only way left to her. Volunteering, demonstrating competence, accumulating enough supervised hours to petition the board for reinstatement. She had not connected Cole to Marcus until the night she'd first touched his hand, and felt the tremor and recognized it, not as an injury, but as a signature. Someone was doing this deliberately. Someone with access to both men. Someone who had poisoned Marcus and was now poisoning Cole, and the compound was in something they both used regularly, something close, something trusted. The wintergreen. Not hers. Not the clinical-grade compound she carried. A different brand, a modified formulation, one that had been introduced to the gym's supply closet 6 months ago by someone who knew exactly what it would do. She had found the bottle on her third visit. She had recognized the chemical compound listed under the proprietary blend, methylcholine ester, a synthetic acetylcholinesterase inhibitor that, in low doses over extended exposure, would cause progressive nerve death that presented exactly like repetitive strain injury. She had replaced it with her own supply. She had removed the contaminated bottle and sealed it in a biohazard bag in her trunk. She had begun treating Cole with a counteragent disguised as a standard anti-inflammatory massage protocol. Daily application of her own wintergreen compound, which contained atropine sulfate in therapeutic doses, enough to arrest the nerve deterioration, but not enough to reverse the existing damage without sustained treatment. She had not told him. She had not told him because telling him meant explaining how she knew, and explaining how she knew meant revealing that she had treated Marcus Webb, and revealing that she had treated Marcus Webb meant revealing that she was the therapist who had been blamed for his death. And if Cole learned that the woman sleeping in his arms was the woman the Navy had held responsible for killing his teammate, he would not let her close enough to save his life. She kept the secret. She applied the wintergreen. She worked on his hand. She slept beside him and counted his breaths and monitored his tremor and adjusted the atropine concentration based on his response, and she told herself that the lie was justified, that the treatment was working, that she would tell him when he was safe. She told herself a lot of things at 2 a.m. in a dark room with a man she was falling in love with, and none of them made her feel less like a fraud. Thursday. She was working on his hand, the proper treatment, the sustained protocol, her thumbs finding the nerve pathways, and the wintergreen soaking through his skin, carrying the atropine to the damaged tissue, when the gym door opened, and a man walked in that made Cole's entire body change. She felt it under her fingers. The shift from relaxation to readiness, a full system activation that happened in less than a second, every muscle fiber in his hand going from pliant to rigid, the tremor vanishing not because of healing but because of adrenaline, the body overriding its own damage to prepare for threat. "Who is that?" she asked. Garrett Hale. The name meant nothing to her. The man did. He was tall, lean, military bearing, mid-40s, with the kind of face that looked assembled rather than born, precise features arranged in an expression of permanent authority. He wore civilian clothes but moved through the gym the way officers move through enlisted spaces, with ownership. "Blackwood," Hale said. "Heard you picked up a new therapist. Thought I'd come see for myself." Cole's hand curled into a fist under Elena's fingers. She pressed down, a signal, a reminder, and he opened it. "Elena Vasquez," Cole said. "She's good. She's private. She's leaving." "I'm not leaving," Elena said. Cole looked at her. Hale looked at her. The entire gym looked at her, or at least the 6 men currently using it, and she understood that she had just contradicted 300 pounds of authority in front of the one person who made that authority flinch, and she did not care. "Miss Vasquez." Hale approached. His shoes made no sound on the rubber flooring, and there was something wrong about that, something practiced. "Have we met?" "No." "Strange. You look familiar." He studied her with the detached interest of a man examining an insect specimen. "Where did you train?" "UC San Diego. Then Walter Reed Extension Program." Something moved behind his eyes. A flicker, a recalculation. "Walter Reed, interesting. They had a good PT department there before the reorganization." "Before the incident," Elena corrected, because she would not let him sanitize it, would not let the death of Marcus Webb be reduced to bureaucratic language. Hale's expression didn't change, but his right hand moved, a small, involuntary adjustment of his watch, rotating the face, a gesture she recognized because she had spent 3 years learning to read the body language of men who had been trained to have none. He was nervous. He had no reason to be nervous unless he knew who she was. And if he knew who she was, he knew what she'd been accused of. And if he knew what she'd been accused of but hadn't already told Cole, then he was holding that information in reserve, a weapon to be deployed when it would do the most damage. "Nice to meet you, Miss Vasquez." He turned to Cole. "Team reunion next month. Henderson's organizing it. He wants to do it here." "Fine. Marcus's family will be there." The name hit the room, and the oxygen changed. Elena's hands stilled on Cole's. She watched his face and saw the grief there, raw, unprocessed, the kind that men like Cole stored in their muscles rather than their memories, the kind that expressed itself as insomnia and hypervigilance and a tremor in the right hand that no one could explain. "I said fine," Cole repeated. Hale left. The gym door closed. The oxygen returned. "Who was Marcus?" Elena asked, and hated herself for the question, for the performance of ignorance, for the way her voice stayed steady while her stomach dropped. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then, "My best friend, died 2 years ago, nerve condition nobody could diagnose. They had him in a PT program at the VA, some therapist they said was good, and one day he went in for a session and didn't come out. What happened? They said the therapist administered a treatment that triggered cardiac arrest, said she'd been using unauthorized protocols. They pulled her license. Do you believe that?" Another silence. "Marcus was getting better. That's what he told me the day before. He said his therapist had figured out what was wrong, said she was the first person who actually listened, and then he was dead, and the official story was that the person who was finally helping him was the person who killed him." He looked at his hand. "I don't know what I believe. I know he's dead. I know my hand is doing the same thing his did, and I know nobody's been able to explain why." Elena's chest constricted. Her mouth opened to tell him everything right then, the words forming behind her teeth like a confession taking shape. And then his right hand tremored violently, a spasm that traveled up his forearm, and she caught it and pressed down and felt the muscles seizing beneath his skin. "It's getting worse," she said. "I know. Cole, I need to tell you." "Not tonight." He turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. "Tonight I need you to do what you do. Fix what you can fix. Stay if you want to." She stayed. She treated his hand for 2 hours. She increased the atropine concentration in the wintergreen by 8% because the tremor was accelerating faster than her models predicted, which meant either the original exposure had been higher than she'd estimated or someone was still dosing him. The second possibility made her hands shake. She checked the gym supply closet after Cole fell asleep. The bottle she'd removed had been replaced. Same brand, same modified formulation, same methylcholine ester tucked into the proprietary blend where nobody would think to look. Someone was still poisoning him. She took the bottle. She replaced it with hers. She went back to the room where he slept and knelt beside the table and put her hand on his chest and felt his heart beating, steady, strong, alive. And she pressed her forehead to his ribs and breathed in wintergreen and sweat and thought, "I will not let you die the way Marcus died. I will not let the same person take you, even if saving you means you never forgive me." Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She came every night. She treated his hand. She increased the atropine. She monitored his symptoms. She brought her equipment from home, the nerve conduction meter, the EMG leads, the portable spectrometer she'd kept from her Walter Reed days, and she ran tests while he slept and documented the results in a notebook she kept in her glove compartment. The damage was stabilizing. The atropine was working. His grip strength improved 11% over 3 days. The tremor decreased in frequency from every 8 seconds to every 14. But each morning she arrived to find the contaminated wintergreen back in the supply closet, and each morning she replaced it. And each morning she understood more clearly that whoever was doing this had access to the gym, had motivation to hurt Cole specifically, and was escalating. On Sunday night, Cole woke at midnight and found her crying. She hadn't meant to. She had been sitting on the floor beside the table, reading his EMG results on her tablet, and the numbers had crystallized something she'd been refusing to see. The damage to his ulnar nerve was not just progressing distally, it was beginning to show proximal spread. The atropine was slowing it, but it was not stopping it, and if the pattern continued, he had approximately 6 weeks before the degeneration reached his brachial plexus, and once it crossed that threshold, the cardiac implications were... She was crying. He woke. He looked over the edge of the table. He saw her face. He got down on the floor. 300 pounds of man folding himself onto cold concrete beside her, his knees cracking, his back against the wall, his arm going around her shoulders and pulling her into his side. "Talk to me," he said. "I can't." Can't or won't. Both. "Elena." His voice was quiet, careful, the voice of a man who knew that the wrong word in the wrong moment could detonate something fragile. "Whatever it is, I'd rather know." "You wouldn't." "Try me." She turned into his chest and pressed her face against his sternum and breathed him in, wintergreen and sweat, and the particular warmth of a man who ran hot, who radiated heat constantly, whose body temperature she had been tracking alongside his other vitals because elevated basal temperature was another symptom of the poisoning, and his was climbing and she was running out of time. "Your hand," she said. "It's not nerve compression." "I know that." She pulled back. "You know? I've had nerve compression, twice. Once in Fallujah, once in training. It doesn't feel like this. This feels systemic. This feels like something moving through me." He held up his right hand. The tremor was visible in the dim light. "I've known for months. I just didn't know what to do about it." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were helping. Because every night you come here and put your hands on me and the shaking stops, and I didn't want to say the thing that would make you realize you can't fix it, because then you might stop coming." "Cole, I would never stop coming." "You might if you knew what I think it is." "What do you think it is?" He was quiet. Then, "I think someone's killing me the same way they killed Marcus." The words landed in her chest and detonated. "And I think," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "that whoever did it is someone close, someone with access, someone who knows what they're doing." He looked at her, and his eyes were clear, and there was no accusation in them, only exhaustion and trust and something that looked terrifyingly like peace. "And I think you know more about it than you've told me." "Cole, I found the bottles, Elena, the ones you keep swapping out. I found the first one in your car 3 days ago when I went to get your jacket, the biohazard bag, the spectrometer readings, the notebook." Her blood stopped moving. "I read the notebook," he said, "all of it, your treatment protocol, the atropine doses, the EMG results, your Walter Reed ID number in the header of every page." He paused. "Your real name." She couldn't breathe. "Elena Vasquez, license number 70734CA, suspended by the California Physical Therapy Board 2 years ago following the death of Petty Officer Marcus Webb during an unauthorized treatment session." He recited it from memory, the way he would recite mission parameters, without emotion, without judgment, with the precision of a man who had spent his life memorizing critical information. "They said you killed him." "I didn't." The words came out broken. "Cole, I swear to God I didn't kill Marcus. He was getting better. I'd identified the toxin 2 days before he died. I was titrating the counteragent. Someone switched my compounds. Someone replaced my atropine solution with a concentrated dose of the same poison, and when I administered what I thought was treatment, she choked, "I gave him the thing that killed him, with my own hands. And I couldn't prove it because the bottles were gone by the time anyone investigated, and my logs showed an unauthorized protocol, and the compound I'd identified wasn't in any standard database, and nobody believed." "I believe you." She stopped. "I believe you," he repeated. "I read your notebook, Elena, every page. The chemistry is beyond me, but the logic isn't. You identified a compound that no one else found. You developed a counteragent. You tested it on Marcus, and it was working. And then someone sabotaged your treatment and let you take the fall." He turned her face toward him with his tremoring hand. "And now you're doing the same thing for me. Same protocol, same compound. Risking your freedom, your career, everything, to save someone you... I love you." The words fell out of her like something she'd been carrying too long, heavy and unwieldy and impossible to hold any longer, and she watched them hit his face and saw the impact. Not surprise, not confusion, just recognition. The expression of a man hearing something he already knew confirmed by the only source he trusted. Lo! His hand seized. Not the tremor. Not the faint rhythmic oscillation she'd been tracking for weeks. A full neurological event, his right hand locking into a rigid claw, the fingers hyperextending, the tendons standing out beneath his skin, and then it spread, up his forearm, into his bicep, his shoulder, his chest, and he made a sound that was not a word but a frequency, a low vibration that traveled through the concrete floor and into her knees, and his eyes rolled back, and his body went rigid, and she caught him as he fell. Cole. He was seizing. Full tonic-clonic, 300 pounds of uncontrolled muscle contraction on a concrete floor, and she rolled him onto his side and cleared his airway and checked her watch, and her hands were steady, because this was what she was trained for. This was the moment her entire career had been building toward, and she would not fail again. She grabbed her bag. The atropine was there. Her compound, her formulation, the concentrated version she'd prepared for exactly this scenario. She loaded the auto-injector with shaking hands that were steady when they needed to be, and found the intercostal space between his third and fourth ribs and pressed the injector against his skin. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. The consent she'd given him from the beginning, given back now in the moment it mattered most. He couldn't answer. He was seizing. His eyes were closed and his body was a war zone, every muscle fighting every other muscle, and she could feel his heart rate through the injector. Tachycardic, irregular, failing. She administered the dose. The atropine hit his system in 14 seconds. She knew because she counted. His muscles began to relax in the same sequence they'd tensed. Shoulder, bicep, forearm, hand. And his breathing stuttered, and then caught, and then steadied. And his heart rate dropped from 160 to 120 to 98. And his eyes opened. He looked at her. "You stayed," he said. "I always stay. I was trying to say something." "I know." "Let me finish." He reached up with his right hand, still tremoring, still damaged, still imprecise, and cupped her face. "I love you," full sentence, no interruption, unbroken. "I love you, and I've known since the first night you put your hands on mine and the shaking stopped. I love you, and I don't care what the board says you did because I know what you're doing now, and what you're doing now is saving my life the same way you tried to save his. I love you, and I am not going to die on this floor." She kissed him. Wintergreen and salt and the metallic taste of adrenaline, and his heart was beating against her palm, and he was alive, and the bare bulb had burned out days ago, but the parking lot light was enough. It was always enough. The gym door opened. Garrett Hale stood in the doorway. Behind him, the supply closet was open. The bottle she'd replaced that morning was in his hand, her bottle, the safe one, the one without the poison. "You keep swapping them," he said. His voice was conversational, unhurried, the voice of a man who had been caught but not yet cornered. "Every day. I put it back, you take it out. I wondered how long it would take." Cole sat up. Elena felt his body change again, the combat readiness, the transformation from patient to weapon, but she kept her hand on his chest, over his heart, a grounding point. "Hale," Cole said. It was supposed to be simple, same protocol as Webb. Slow enough to look natural, fast enough to be done before anyone noticed. But then she showed up. He looked at Elena. "I knew who you were the moment I saw you, the therapist who almost ruined everything. You found the compound, you found the delivery mechanism. Another week and you'd have traced it back to me, so I switched your solution and let you take the blame." He set the bottle on the counter. "You should have stayed gone, Miss Vasquez." "Why?" Elena asked. Her voice was flat, clinical, the voice she used when she was too angry to be anything but precise. "Why Marcus? Why Cole?" "Because they saw something they shouldn't have. Mosul, 2017, a chemical weapons cache that was supposed to be destroyed. I diverted 3 canisters to a private contractor. Marcus found the paperwork. Cole was asking questions." He looked at Cole. "You never stop asking questions, Blackwood, even when the answers will kill you." "You sold chemical weapons," Cole said. "I sold security, retirement, a future that didn't involve a VA hospital and a tremor nobody could diagnose." He reached behind his back. "I'm sorry about Marcus. He was a good man, but good men are expensive to keep alive when they know things they shouldn't." "Hands where I can see them, Commander." The voice came from behind Hale. Tommy Park stepped out of the equipment cage with his phone in one hand, recording. and a 45-pound plate in the other. Behind him, 2 more gym regulars blocked the back exit, and through the front windows, blue and red lights were pulling into the parking lot. Hale's hand froze behind his back. "I called them 20 minutes ago," Tommy said, "when I came back from my headphones and heard you monologuing in the doorway like a Bond villain. Seriously, man, you could have just left." "Park." "Nah." Tommy set the plate down. "I spent 4 years watching you orbit this gym like you owned it, watching Cole's hand get worse every week, watching Elena show up every night and fix what you kept breaking. I didn't know what you were doing, but I knew something was wrong. And tonight you walked in here and explained it all very clearly while my phone was recording, so thank you for that." The police entered. 2 officers, then 4, then a detective Elena recognized from the VA investigation, Detective Moran, who had questioned her for 11 hours after Marcus died, who had looked at the evidence and concluded she was guilty, who was now looking at Garrett Hale with an expression that contained not apology but reassessment, which was the closest a detective ever got to admitting they were wrong. "Garrett Hale," Moran said, "you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Webb, the attempted murder of Cole Blackwood, and the falsification of evidence in a federal investigation. You have the right to remain silent." Hale did not remain silent. He talked for 47 minutes in the back of the squad car, according to Tommy, who followed the cruiser to the precinct and live texted updates to a group chat that included every member of Ironside Gym. He confessed to diverting the chemical weapons. He confessed to developing the methylcholine ester compound from the diverted canisters. He confessed to poisoning Marcus Webb through a modified wintergreen solution introduced to the VA treatment room. He confessed to framing Elena for the death. He confessed to introducing the same compound to Ironside's supply closet when Cole began investigating Marcus's case. He confessed to replacing Elena's atropine bottles every morning for 3 weeks. He did not confess to being sorry. Some men never do. Elena sat on the floor of the back room with Cole's head in her lap and her hand on his chest and the wintergreen drying on both of them. And she watched the blue light spin through the high windows, and she breathed. The board reinstated her license 6 weeks later. The hearing took 11 minutes. The evidence from Hale's confession, combined with Elena's treatment logs and the contaminated bottles she'd preserved, was conclusive. The board chair used the word exonerated. Elena preferred believed. Cole's hand recovered. Not fully. The existing nerve damage was permanent, a reminder written in the tremor that still appeared when he was tired or cold or thinking too hard about things he couldn't control. But the progression stopped. The proximal spread reversed. The cardiac risk dropped to 0. He would not die on a concrete floor. He would not die at all, at least not from this, at least not yet. He proposed on a Tuesday, in the back room, on the folding table that still creaked when either of them sat on it. He got down on one knee, which was absurd given his size and the height of the table and the geometry of the small space, and he held out a ring with his right hand, and the tremor was there, faint and rhythmic, and the ring shook slightly in the air between them. "Is that okay?" he asked. She took his hand. The tremor stopped. "There," she said, "right there." He put the ring on her finger. She pressed her palm to his chest. The wintergreen was between them, always between them, the scent that had been poison and cure and everything in between, and in the bare bulb light of the room where they had first touched, first spoken, first broken each other open and decided to stay. She kissed him, and he kissed her back, and the table held. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, drop a comment, tell me whose story you want next. And remember, the people who save your life don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like a woman with steady hands and a secret she's carrying for you, standing in a doorway, choosing to stay.